And so today I wanted to talk to you about the women who have led you to be so successful, so confident. And I think how she led to me is I'm talking to historians, thought leaders, journalists. And I guess I just want to know what your childhood was like and who the women are who shaped you, because I think we're all shaped in those earliest moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it is great to be here. Thank you for having me. And, I would say it starts, of course, my mom, who is Philomena Augustina Carol Lomena. Her name was Philomena, and she married somebody's last name was Lomena. So it's like she's Philomena Lomena, which is a weird thing. But she was just a really incredible, adventurous soul. She left Guyana at like 29, 30 years old, flew to England or took a ship to England, became a teacher, got her college degree, then came to the US on her own, and kind of established our family roots here on that side. She ended up dating my father, who was a Congolese student. And they had my sister, then me, and then they broke up, got back together, had my brother. It's like a whole mess. But we wound up growing up in Denver, Colorado. And I would say she was, my biggest influence, just her sense of adventure. We didn't have money, so she had a government job which got cut by Ronald Reagan, and she had to reinvent herself. His first budget like slashed her federal job as a nutritionist. She's beasts and children. And then she had to reinvent herself and got her PhD, became a college professor. And, we would do these like massive road trips all over the country. We had to drive because we couldn't afford to fly, my mom and three kids as a
Yeah.
single mom. So we were like driving adventure people. We drove everywhere. We drove to San Francisco when she wanted to see a friend of hers. We drove, through Utah to Las Vegas. We drove my sister to college. Like we were driving people. And probably our biggest adventure when I was 13 is we drove to Oaxaca, Mexico, way in the south,
Wow.
because she was doing a chapter in a book, a colleague, professor colleague of hers book, who was an anthropologist. She was writing the nutrition chapter. So she was my biggest influence, just her brilliance, her sense of adventure, her fearlessness. And then I would say the other woman that was really very much in our lives was her best friend in um, Denver, Rita Lejeune Bradford, who was a chain smoking, um, she used to make her own clothes. She was like a Renaissance woman. She was a University of Chicago graduate. She'd actually been a communist in her youth when she was at the University of Chicago and was like an activist and just this phenomenal. She was married for like one day because her husband mistreated her the first day, so she divorced him. So
Nice. I like that.
she was just this
Yeah.
phenomenal, like kooky lady. And we grew up pretty much in her house, and she had her own garden in the backyard, made her own food, made her, grew her own food. She was just this cool person. So I would say between those two women, my mom's little sister, my Auntie Dolly Prudence, and my godmother, my Jamaican godmother, who was my mom's best friend in college, those four women I think have had the biggest impact on who I am.
The woman who was married for a day, and I just love that story. Is she
Yeah.
still is she still with us? Do you keep in touch with her?
No, my mom and my and her best friend Lashune, they both passed. My mom passed when I was 17. Unfortunately, she got me almost to Harvard. She knew I got into Harvard, but she didn't get to be a part of that experience. So June kind of picked up June and my auntie Dolly like picked up the ball from there, and I wound up back in Brooklyn living with my aunt and and her Lejeune, who's the only adult we were ever allowed to call by her first name. It's sort of like Black cultural tradition. You call everyone
Yeah.
auntie, even if they're not really your auntie. But Lejeune would not let us call her Auntie Lejeune. We had to call her Lejeune because she was like, I'm nobody's auntie. I'm like Lejeune. So we got to call her first name, which was actually kind of like cool. Like we loved that we
Yeah.
could call this grown woman her first name. But she and my Auntie Dolly like got me through college, and she passed unfortunately in her 80s. But we got to do great things together, go to the theater, and I got to be a part of her adventure and hear her stories. And so her influence was really a lot of sort of my like intellectual curiosity as an adult. Like she was one of the people who really supplied that. And then my auntie Bernice, who kind of picked up the ball from there, was like a ferocious Jamaican,
Mhm.
more maroon. They called themselves maroon. These were the Jamaicans who were so hard to control during slavery. They ran into the hills and escaped enslavement, and the white enslavers were too afraid to go in the hills and get them, so they were just independent.
Oh
And
my God.
that's my godmother. She's still alive, by the way. She refuses to die. She is 92 years young.
That's awesome. And how did they impact how you wanted to be treated by a man? Because I think that a lot of this is also like standing up for yourself and knowing how you should be treated and respected as a woman. And was did they ever say anything to you about like don't accept somebody who doesn't give you the respect you deserve and all that? Because I think that's missing for a lot of young women still.
I think so too. And because I had my mom was a single mother, so
Yeah.
she never like prioritized the idea of marriage. In fact, she was like, very clear on who not to marry. She was like, her and look, I am a Pan-Africanist, so don't take this the wrong way, but she was like, no Africans, because she had a terrible. My father was a terrible father,
Ah.
terrible husband. He was a polygamist. Yeah, just a whole
Oh
long
my
story.
God.
But so she was like, don't go down that road. No polygamists. And my auntie Dolly, she had this like young love, my uncle Bertram, who died very young. And
Oh,
so I think she's the person who kind of, my mother taught me just independence and not really needing. I always used to tell my godmother, I may want a man, but I don't need one. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to
yeah.
be in a need position. You want to be in, I want this relationship. I don't need it.
Yes.
But my godmother was much more traditional. She was very marriage oriented. She was like sort of,
Mm.
belaboring us to get married and,
Oh my
and be a
gosh.
good wife. And she was the other perspective. But my auntie Dolly, my mom's little sister, she had so much like love tragedy. And I actually dedicated Medgar and Murley to her because she had had that same kind of intense love and loss as Miss Murley. And I kind of felt like she was the sort of the Miss Murley character in my life. But I think what all of these women kind of taught me, other than Lejeune, who was like, ditch that
Yeah.
hoe, push him to the side of the car.
I love her. Yeah.
It was all about independence. It was all about being your own person. Like, you have to actually kind of marry yourself first and know who you are and be your own best spouse before you start looking to fill some gap with another person. Because, you have to kind of try to own your own person within a relationship, and that is not easy.
Mhm.
It's a challenge, and sharing your space is a
Mhm.
challenge. So I think all of these women cumulatively just kind of taught me to just defend my existence as an individual person as well as being in a relationship.
Yeah, and you and your husband have been married a long time, I know, right? Because yeah, I think it takes a lot of patience. I've only been married for 17 years, but it takes a lot of patience just being around somebody day in and day out, right? And so, um, I love my husband, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
It
no,
takes
it's a lot.
and from their perspective too. Um, I love this question that Rachel Martin asks in Wild Card. I don't know if you've seen her NPR show where she literally just picks cards up and asks people questions. And I just thought this was I'd love to know your answer to this is, and it ties into the women in your life. What's a piece of advice you were smart to ignore, do you think, in your life? What's something?
Oh,
I love that question.
I
Um,
love that
yeah.
question. A piece of advice I was smart to ignore. I definitely think my as much as I love my godmother was such a ferocious is such a ferocious person that it's interesting that she's like the most traditional out of all of my women sort of influencers. And her advice was always basically cook and clean and do everything for a man to keep him. Like, do all of these steps to keep your husband around, which I think is like it puts you in a position of almost being in a labor position in your relationship rather than in a partnership position. So I've never listened to her relationship
Yeah. I hope not.
advice. I listen to all her other advice, but relationship advice is harder to listen to because she really is. I think she just grew up at a time and in an era when women were just so defined by marriage, and it was such a critical part of it was such a critical goal. Like, it was a goal in and of itself. And I never think that that should be a goal in and of itself for women because it just put, that is such an old fashioned Victorian kind of positioning, that my mother never believed. Like my mother was literally like fine as a single woman. Like she wasn't even seeking another marriage. Like once she was done with my polygamous father, she was just like, I'm single, and she was kind of cool with it.
Was your mom a self-proclaimed feminist, would you say? Would she have called herself a feminist?
It's interesting because she was Caribbean, and I feel like Caribbean women don't really um they don't really characterize themselves as feminists. I think they just are in their actions and in the way they live their lives. I would see her as a feminist, but I'm not sure she would have called herself that, only because culturally, I don't think that that's something that her culture really recognized.
Why do you think that is? So many times I ask people that question, and not one woman has said that her mother would call herself a feminist. And I guess everyone I'm talking to is in their 40s, 50s, but there's that
Yeah.
like stigma with that word. Do you think that still exists today?
I definitely do. I think that women of that generation, because my mother would have been, I guess my mother was born in 1929. Lejeune was born in 1933. My godmother was born in, I think, 1932. So all of these women are silent generation. They're Joe Biden generation. And I think for them, their boomer daughters
Yeah.
were sort of renegades to be feminists. And so there really wasn't a tradition of feminism, even if there were the actions that we would characterize as feminist. I think there was a pejorative kind of around that term for women of that age in that generation. So I think that, and then I think you add to that that Black women typically have not been part of the feminist movement, or have not seen themselves in that movement. I remember I took a class on this at Harvard. It was interesting because it was white and Black women kind of the sort of opposite ways that we come to feminism and our opposite kind of vibe and feeling about it. Um, and it's an interesting thing, right? Because Gloria Steinem, I think, was such a revolutionary character and tried to
Yeah.
be super inclusive and make feminism accessible to women of color. But there was always like a little struggle. I think because Black women were never put on a feminine pedestal. And
Mhm.
so the idea of bypassing even being able to be like women on a pedestal in that bypass to feminism was odd for a lot of Black women. So I think they just never joined that movement. So
Yeah.
it's just interesting because now, like, Beyonce age women are like open feminists.
Yeah.
It's just my daughter is an open feminist. It's just
I think
interesting.
it's great to see, and I think that's from the very beginning of the feminist movement, right? Sojourner Truth wasn't invited to Seneca Falls. There was the
Right.
white women who were like, "We need to get the vote first, and you're gonna have to wait your turn." And I think those were the seeds of that, right? Back in the
Yeah.
1800s, which
Yeah.
is a terrible thing. But and then another question I need to ask you because I'm dying to hear what you'd say to this. What's something you still feel you need to prove to people when you meet them? Is there
Ooh.
anything? I know this is another wild card question. I love it.
No, I love this question. It's a good question. That's so interesting. I find, and I don't really necessarily work that hard to prove it to people, but I find that I need to prove to people that I don't like somehow hate Republicans, you know? Because
Yes.
I think people just think that I just absolutely am just wound up with like hatred toward
Yes.
Republicans. I think conservatism is dangerous and has always been dangerous to my people. But there was a long period in which conservatives were the Democrats. This
Yeah,
is not a
yeah.
My father was a Republican. If he had been an American citizen, he was a whole Reaganite. So it's not Republicans, it's conservatism that I have a challenge with. And I have an intellectual and moral challenge with it. I don't hate the people, but I
Mhm.
I do think people just assume, and it's funny because I always get people who are surprised that I'm so friendly if they're like a right winger
Yeah.
Republican. They can't believe I'm so friendly to them. I'm like, you're just a human being. I don't hate you. I just don't like conservatism. Calm down.
Yeah,
My name
yeah.
is Joy. I'm friendly.
You're very nice. Yeah. No, I
Great. I'm
know.
like, I'm nice. Like, what are we doing? I'm not angry. I'm just
Yeah.
like, just don't like your ideas.
But it does feel like now, I mean, when you look at what's happening now to women's rights, and to, disenfranchising Black voters, do you think that, I guess I'm just wondering if you think this is a broader question, but given your background, given your upbringing, do you think the first woman president will be a Republican, or do you think the first woman president will be a Democrat? Because I think she will be a Republican, and I don't think that's a good thing. But don't you think that there is a feeling within the Republican Party that they will get behind whoever it is, and the Democrats, there is this circular firing squad a little bit?
I do, and I also think, the Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris runs for president kind of convinced me that I'm not sure we will have a woman president. Like, I'm not sure in my lifetime that we will have one at all.
Yeah.
um, because I found it's interesting. So I'll tell you a quick story. When Hillary was running, my mother-in-law, who's from England, my husband is Jamaican background, but they're from England. So my English mother-in-law was in town visiting us during the Hillary Clinton, the general
Yeah.
election. And of course, because she's from Britain, they get great health care even when they travel. So she had, like pulled her back or something, and she was getting daily daily massages paid for by the British government
Oh,
because they have actual decent health
yeah.
care. So I'm taking
Mhm.
her to her daily because I worked in the in radio, so I had like an early schedule. So I would take her every day to these appointments. And the woman at this place where she was getting these massages, it wasn't daily, it was probably like 3 times a week. Took her in for her,
So
taking her in for her, twice, thrice weekly massage. And the receptionist was a 60 something year old white American woman. So she's like Hillary's age group. And
mhm.
and once I, because I see her all the time, I decided strike up a conversation with her and say, hey, we may be in the verge of having a first woman president. And I'm thinking this woman who like kind of even looked like Hillary. You know what I mean? I'm like, I could
Yeah.
tell she's Hillary's contemporary. And I'm thinking she's going to say, yeah, that's going to be amazing. She looked at me deadpan and said, I don't want a woman president. Women are not meant to be presidents. Women are meant to be helpmeets. It's offensive to my religion that Hillary Clinton wants to be president. I can't stand her. I hate Hillary Clinton. And I was like kind of stunned. I didn't know what to say.
Wow.
But then
Yeah.
I kept finding that out. Like I kept finding women. Actually, I'm sorry. At this point, I was working at MSNBC. So yeah, I was at MSNBC. I was doing my weekend show. Right, I was doing my weekend show at this point. So we were doing town hall and doing different events, and I kept finding this out. We were in Iowa at this like restaurant thing, and I'm walking through and just putting the microphone to people, and the men who were like Hillary's age were saying, yeah, I guess it's time for a woman. It's a woman shot. Women, it's their turn. The women, particularly white women, over 60, were just hostile to Hillary. Like they were just a hell no. They were like, I don't like her. I hate her. I've hated her my whole life. So it really was like, okay, she doesn't have her sisters. This is when I
Yeah.
started to realize she's probably in trouble. Then with Kamala Harris, I found the same kind of dynamic. Like some of the most vicious smears against her, accusing her of sleeping her way to the top, accusing her of not really being black, accusing her of, were coming from women, including women of color, including black women. And I'm like, I didn't see that women wanted a woman president that badly. Women were there. I think we've been trained. America's a very puritanical country. It's like liberal in the cultural sense some ways, and their Hollywood is super liberal and our entertainment is super liberal and we cuss in our music.
Mhm.
But there is a misogyny in America, and there's like a hatred of women in America that's something that is on the order of the hatred of black people. It's kind of
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
equally intense. So I'm not sure that there are enough women who want a woman president to get a woman elected, you know?
I think that's true, and I think that's just says a lot about where we are, because the statistics show that what you're saying is absolutely true. There were a lot of white women who voted for Donald Trump in this last election, and a
A
lot of
majority of them.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, and you think, are they voting for him because they're listening to what their husbands are saying, or do they actually think that he's good for women? It's a fascinating thing. Like I just can't understand how you I know there's a college educated there is a little bit of a differentiation there, right, between the women who voted for him and who voted for Kamala. But I do think a lot of women are each other's worst enemies, which is just a sad like even in workplaces, sometimes there's like a feeling that there are too few seats at the table, and why do
Yeah.
I want to help somebody else up? And I'm hoping that we're moving away from that. Do you think we are?
So I think we slowly so so I have a whole I don't want to go into at length, but I
Yeah,
have a whole
yeah.
lecture on this. I used to do it by students. The reality is if you go through if white women went into a spaceship and went up to another planet, which is gone during an election, Hillary would have won
What?
and Kamala would have won. Um, Black women, 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris. 90+% of Black women voted for Hillary Clinton. 65% of Latinas voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Something like 60% of Latinas voted for Kamala Harris. AAPI women voted 70-30 for Hillary and
Wow.
voted very close to over 65% for Kamala. So it is a very particular thing to white women who have been very, I think, methodically separated from other women. And just you talked about during, the fight for the franchise,
Yeah.
there was a deliberate attempt by the men who were willing to go with letting white women have the franchise in order to get prohibition. They were
Mm,
like, we'll do that, but we're not going to go so far as to have integration too, right? And
right.
so the fact is that white women remain in a Victorian space in this country, despite being basically property too in the beginning of this country. But there's been a particular effort that's been very successful to keep white women on side with white men. Because if white men and women went into a space and or vanished off the face of the earth, we clapped our fingers, they went away, there would have only been Democratic presidents since Lyndon Johnson. Like no Republican would have won anything, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem, and then what's changed things a little bit, and this is the reason that the right deeply opposes DEI, which helps Black people, but even more helps white women. And they deeply oppose affirmative action, which helps Black people, and they paint it as Black, but it even more helps white women. Is that white college educated women are starting to shift. So now you go to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton lost white college educated women, but barely. She almost 50-50, which helped her to get 3 million, a margin of 3 million votes, right? So that split, it started to happen with Hillary. Kamala Harris, like outright won college barely, like 51-52%. But that is a sea change that Project 2025 is in part designed to end. Because in order to keep power, conservatives, whether they used to be Democrats or now Republicans, they cannot lose white women. And right now, they really only solidly have white non-college women. So the goal now is to
Mm,
drive white women out of college, out of the Pentagon, out of the military, and back into the kitchen, this trad wife thing, to
yeah.
make white women behave. Because if white women ever stopped behaving and
Mm,
started siding with all the other women, conservatism would be cooked. Like it
yeah.
would be done because
Yeah.
it's only white women holding it up at this
Yeah.
point. The only thing between us and a Mamdani style government in Washington is white women. And so that's why white conservatives are so determined to not let white women get college degrees, and they don't want them to have careers, and they want family voting. This is not about me and my family. This is about you and your family, because this is what's unacceptable, and it's only holding up
Yeah.
this autocracy.
And keep having more and more children, right? And keep being busy at
Yes,
home. Yes. Um,
correct.
one final thing I want to ask you is: was there any saying that your mom had, going back to your mom or your aunts or your mom's best friend, that you just kind of think in your
Mhm.
mind, like, because there was a great one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show was there was a great New York Times podcast during Mother's Day where people would just call in and be like, here's a saying from my mom that I always think about. My mom would say, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, because I was kind of a brat. You know, and she is right, as frustrating as that is. Is there anything that your mom said to you where you're like, oh, it's in the back of your mind, you know?
I was a yappy kid, and so my mom used to say, "Girl, if you could get paid to talk, you would be a millionaire."
And look at you
She
now.
literally said that. So that's one of
That's
my
great.
favorite things to remember my mom always saying, because I would just never stop talking. And so she's like, if you could just get paid to talk, you'd be a millionaire. That was one.
You did?
But my other sort of family members, I'll give you a saying from each. My godmother's favorite saying, and she says it all the time, is disappointment works for good. Is, and it's a great old Jamaican saying, because it's true. Like, things that you think are meant for bad will turn to your benefit. I mean, getting fired on my day off wasn't pleasant, but it's actually worked out great. It's given me freedom and liberation, to sort of exist outside the corporate media space. But and my auntie Dolly was super religious, so all her sayings are Christian, and very Christian religion wise. Lean on the Lord, and all that kind of thing, and lean on God. Love my auntie Dolly. She's going to turn 90, by the way, in October. So God bless my auntie Dolly.
Oh,
But the last one I'll give is Lejeune, because Lejeune was just that girl.
yeah.
Lejeune used to say, and Lejeune was very slim. She was very fit. And she, like I said, she made her own clothes, and she had like a perfect little size 6 frame, and she was fabulous. But she would always say to me, I never stand when I can sit. I never, I never run when I can walk, and I never walk when I can ride. So
Oh
she's
my
like, I will
God.
not be bothered. I will be comfortable, and I will be happy, and no one's going to mess with my joy. She
Oh my God. You need to get that on like a pillow. I love that. Oh my God. Like, why make life harder than it needs to
Yeah,
be? Right?
she was like, I don't have to walk. I could sit
What?
down. If you
What?
offered her a wheelchair when she got older, she was my godmother was super like weird about her wheelchair. She had to ride. I took her to the White House, to meet her son Barack Obama, and pushed her in the wheelchair. And she was sort of weird about it. Oh, I don't want you to push. I don't want to go to any trouble. If you offer Lejeune a wheelchair, she's like, let me ride, bitch. Put me in the chair and push me.
And she'd make it look elegant somehow.
Oh, she
Yeah.
would be in her fabulous thing, a hat, and she's fabulous with her big glasses, and she's
Oh
like,
my
"Let me
God.
ride,
I
let me ride."
I think we can come away from this with Lejeune by far being the coolest woman I
Yeah,
have heard about. Yeah, she sounds great,
most
and your mom
definitely.
too.
But
Like,
no,
awesome.
but smoking will kill you. Don't be her. But it's my mother died at 57 as a non-smoking, non-drinking Christian,
Yeah,
good girl. My
yeah.
Miss Lejeune lived to be 80, even though she was a chain smoker who refused to exercise. So look at the world.
It's like you can't explain it.
No.
Um, well, Joy, I'm so overjoyed to talk to you. I love your show and I love what you're doing in Joy's house. And you've got a whole women. I was looking at your latest post. You have a guest writer on your Substack talking about the women in her life, which I loved.
Yes,
So, like,
yes.
more that we can celebrate the women who made us. And it sounds like you had 4 amazing women in your life. So, very cool. And
Thank you.
definitely get that phrase monogrammed on a pillow somewhere.
I'm definitely gonna start making the merch.
Oh my God. Well, thank you everyone for joining us too. This was an awesome conversation. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.